Welcome to Unscripted, a podcast with no script by design. We're not following a plan, and that's exactly the point. This show is about whatever's on the minds of your hosts, Larry Lannan and Duncan Giles. We'll dig into what's happening in the world, and just as importantly, what isn't making headlines this week. So with that, let's get started. The conversation could go anywhere because we go wherever the microphones take us. Here's Larry Lannan and Duncan Giles. I'm Lannan, he's Giles, and this is Lannan and Giles Unscripted. It's our August 1st edition. So Duncan Giles, welcome back.
Thanks, Larry. It's always good to be here.
Well, I do have a couple of housekeeping things to discuss. First of all, we want you to please like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast, especially if you're on YouTube watching it. It helps our podcast grow, and we would appreciate that. Also, we will have no podcast next week. And you know, Duncan, once again, it's our producer that's not available. What are we going to do with this?
Yeah,
guy?
you know, there's an issue here somewhere. There needs to be some accountability, sir.
So should I talk to our podcast producer? What do you think?
I think you should. I think you should have a stern talk with him.
Well, I always have talks with myself on a regular basis, so we'll take care of this. I am the producer, in case you don't know. We do have a guest this week, and we're very happy to have that guest. And I'm going to ask Duncan Giles to introduce our guest this week.
Yeah, we have a longtime friend of mine for more decades than either one of us would probably care to admit, the former national president of the National Treasury Employees Union, Tony Reardon. Tony, glad to have you on the podcast again.
Duncan and Larry, I am very excited to be with you, but I must tell you that I got a little bit nervous there in that intro when Larry was talking about this is the last podcast for a couple of weeks. This is the one that many of your listeners and viewers are going to remember for that whole 2-week period, so it puts the pressure on.
Oh, no pressure at all for you. No pressure at all. Just, if this thing tanks with the new format, it's all on you. But, no pressure.
All right, I hear you.
We're going to be a little more freewheeling now. We've kind of had little departments and that kind of thing, so we decided we may bring some of those things up, we may not, but we just would like to have a discussion. And I guess, Tony, the first thing I would ask you is you had a high pressure job being the president of a national union, and you had a spotlight on you. You had a national profile. My question to you is, once you left that stage and went into retirement, what kind of an adjustment was that like for you?
So let me take you back to August of 23. So I on Thursday night of the at the banquet for NTEU, that was kind of really the end of my NTEU career, so to speak. That next morning, I woke up and I had 0 emails. And remember, I'd been at NTEU for 33 and a half years. There was no time ever that I woke up with 0 emails. And in fact, throughout the day, each day, I would get many emails. So the adjustment was something like a bucket of cold water being thrown, on me. Like, hey, welcome to retirement. So that was, I guess, kind of the first thing that I would note. Then after that, I'll tell you, this, and I talk to people all the time. They'll ask me, so what's retirement like? What do you think? And retirement's great. But I will tell you this, at least from my perspective, no matter how much you prepare, you prepare financially, you prepare sort of emotionally, you get things kind of laid out. Okay, I'm going to do this, and this. And at least for me, it kind of takes on a completely different perspective. Things just happened differently than I had really planned. And I'll tell you, the one thing that I tell people when I talk to them about retirement is, really figure out when you go into retirement, what is your purpose? If you can figure out what your, so-called purpose is, I think that just gets you so far down the road toward really being comfortable in your retirement. So it's, I think probably like every person, you struggle a little bit because, like you mentioned, the job I had and really it was the work that I really loved and the fighting on behalf of federal employees. I mean, you want to talk about a purpose? There's a purpose there, right? And then to go into retirement, that of course, in some ways went away, not completely, because I'm still out there fighting, and we can talk about that. But yeah, it's been a little bit of a transition, but in so many ways, a fabulous transition.
Well, I guess I'm the veteran at retirement here because I'm retired for 13 years now. Duncan, you're a newly retired person as well. So, Duncan, what is your purpose?
Yeah, that's the thing. When Tony's talking about purpose, I'm like going, okay, being a slug. Now doing the podcast and trying to figure out exactly, got some irons in the fire, so to speak, trying to figure out exactly what I want to do, in a purely passion type of thing. That's the big thing for me is like, once you retire, everybody says have a plan or be figuring what you want to do. Larry, you've immersed yourself in the city you live in Fishers. You're the go-to person. Tony's made a little bit of a switch in location wise, going from the Triangle to North Carolina. And I want to hear about that transition. And for me, it's still, exploring and figuring out exactly what I want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I started this little news blog where I work or where I live. Not where I work anymore. Obviously.
You work there now, Larry.
Yeah, okay, you say that, but I remember telling my wife I'm going to write this local news blog because local news is hard to find, and maybe I get a couple 300 people reading it, who might be like government nerds like myself. Last year, I had over 100,000 unique visitors on my website.
Whoa.
People are reading it. There is a hunger for local news. And of course, if you don't have a paywall, that is a big thing. But I've also worked for money. I did one tax season for TurboTax, doing tax questions. That's a whole other issue. But then I did some teaching for Indiana University, so I did a few gigs for money. But I'm pretty much now retired and not doing much of anything.
Yeah, some of those gigs for money we probably can't talk about on this podcast. I don't know if the statute of limitations is passed on those or not.
They haven't, so we'll keep that.
Okay.
Duncan, you shouldn't have mentioned that, Duncan.
Yeah, your escorting is strictly legit.
Yeah, I'm a really in demand there. So I guess Tony, yeah, I mean you're sitting in North Carolina, which is a place you have some history. You're ensconced yourself there. So I think now that you've had a little bit of time to be retired, have you figured out where your place is as a retiree or work on the side? Where are you fitting in now?
Yeah, I'm going to say I think I have, because the reality is, Larry, that I'm kind of open to a lot of things, maybe in ways that previously I wasn't, just because I didn't have the time, and so I'll tell you, moving from the Washington D.C. area where I lived for over 30 years, fast paced, things are happening all the time. Plus, with work and travel and all that. It really changed to move to a small town in eastern North Carolina. And, traffic jams, like, no. If there's five cars, going through town at the same time, it's like, holy mackerel, what's going on here in Bayboro? So certainly it's been a change. Well, I'll tell you, this is kind of funny when I think I just thought of this. When we first moved here, it was a Saturday, and we're driving through Main Street, and we're looking around. It's Saturday, and I want to say it was around 2 o'clock. And we're looking around, and I'm thinking, all right, well, we need to go to this hardware store, Wait a minute, it's closed? The pace of life here is just different. Restaurants, and really in a lot of the area where we live, 8 o'clock at night during the week, closed. They're done. So that was really a big change. The dry cleaners, Saturday afternoon, noon, closed. Um, so that's, certainly been a change. But I will tell you this, we live on the Bay River. And Dawn, my wife, and I joke all the time that when we wake up in the morning and we walk out and you look and you see this panoramic view of this river, it is really, in fact, our pastor at our church last week said, "Hey, folks, think about this. Where we live, people pay good money every summer to come down here to visit."
Yeah.
And so I tell you that because it's almost like a you wake up on vacation every day. Now, clearly, you've got life's things that go on and all that, but it's really just unbelievable to be able to look out there and say, "Wow, okay, so this is good." Now, what I will also tell you in terms of answering the question about my place, have I found my place? One of the things that was clear to me very early on was that part of my place was kind of in the political realm. And so I will tell you that as we sit here right now, I am the first vice chair of the Pamlico County Democratic Party.
Nice.
So I'm very involved in that. And then there's another group here that I'm very involved in, and it's a nonpartisan group. So there are people that are involved from the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, unaffiliated, they call independents here in North Carolina. And we meet a couple of times a week, and we really deal with issues that are both local and also national and state issues. And we kind of team up with various groups at times, Indivisible and some of these other groups, like when the No Kings marches were going on and that sort of thing. So I really have my kind of hands really in deep with a lot of the issues that I think we as a country are facing today, things that I think are critically important for American citizens to stand up and be counted for.
Now, I have to ask you this question before I give Duncan a chance to ask you some questions, because one of the last things we talked about the last time we had you on a podcast when we were doing the podcast for Chapter 49, you said you wanted to dip your toe into doing sports play-by-play. Have you done that yet?
I have, as when I was actually thinking of that very part of our conversation, Larry, when I said, things kind of have a way of not happening the way maybe you would imagine prior to retirement. And that's really the one thing that I was or one of the things that I was thinking about. No, I've done none of that. And I'll tell you, I used to laugh. I would have conversations with Colleen Kelly, who was the national president of NTEU before me, and she retired. And and I would talk to her pretty regularly, and she would tell me, Tony, I'm more busy now than I was when I was the national president. And I used to sit and hear that and say, that's impossible. Now, I really do think it is impossible, but even now, but the point that I think she was making and the point that I will make is that, I feel like I am busy all the time, doing things. And Duncan, like you mentioned, I've got my kind of toes dipped in some things as well. And so I feel like I'm doing stuff, all the time. And I think that's kind of important. And the other thing is that I am able to spend time on family things
Yeah.
that I just was not able, I just wasn't able to do it at the level that I really wanted to. And so I will say that, one of the things I'm really looking forward to is our second oldest child, Maria, is within about a month and a half or so of giving birth to our first grandchild.
Oh, awesome.
So,
Congrats.
yeah, thank you. So, I've been thinking about things like, okay, so in retirement, part of my role here in life is to be a grandfather, and what does that mean? And so, what do I need to do in that role? So I've been
Spoil
given,
them and give them back to the parents.
yeah, I think that's probably right. But I'm able to focus on those kinds of things instead of, worrying about the conversation I'm about to have with the IRS commissioner or the CBP commissioner or one of those kinds of things.
Tony, before I turn this over to Duncan, I just wanted to mention one thing. Uh, I think you'll enjoy this story. If you ever decide to get into sports play-by-play, because as a kid, that's all I ever wanted to do. So when I ended up working for a radio station, and the manager gave me a shot at actually doing a high school football game. So I did some play-by-play in a high school football game. I came home. My mother listened to the game. She looked at me in the
You
eye.
told me this. This is great.
She looked me in the eye and said, "Larry, you were terrible. You were terrible. And if you don't get better, you're going to get fired." What I learned from that experience, in case this ever comes up for you, is I never understood how much preparation a play-by-play announcer does before you do the game. I learned that lesson and did play-by-play for a few years after that and learned that lesson. But if you ever decide to do this, do your homework before you do the game. And Duncan, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Yeah, well, the phrase if you don't improve, you're going to be fired. Isn't that something our wives say to us weekly? Just
Well,
thought.
more than weekly, I must say.
Well, Duncan, I think you heard me mention this at the 2023 convention, my last NTEU convention, right before I was unemployed, retired, I guess I should say. I used to have conversations with Dawn, and I guess there would be times when I would kind of act like the national president at home, and Dawn would tell me, Tony, you may be the national president in NTEU. You are not the national president here at home. So, as I said at the convention, I was pretty well prepared to become the national executive vice president of the Reardon family as opposed to being the national president there. So I'm kind of getting used to all that.
You got the VP slot with her? I wasn't sure if you'd have number two or if you'd be further down.
Well, okay, so I've got to be honest here. So I had a conversation with my son-in-law, Zach, who's married to Maria. Maria's the one that's about to give birth. And I said to Zach, Zach, are you prepared for this? And he said, well, not really. Like, I don't really even know because he was a single child, and I don't really even know what I'm doing. And Maria's got to coach me through all this stuff. And I said, oh, no, I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about the real stuff. Like, are you prepared? Like right now, Zach, you're kind of top of the heap, man. And I said, you are very quickly moving into slot number 2. And I said, and then when you have another child, you move to slot 3 and so on and so forth. And I said, Zach, look, here's the thing. I speak from experience. I am in slot number 5 right now. And your child is about to be born. I am quickly going to go to slot 6.
Well, I must say, I'll say this very quickly, Tony. I have 3 grandkids now. My oldest is a grandson who's going to turn 5 soon. Greatest thing that ever happened to me. You are going to absolutely love being a grandfather.
Well, I am truly looking forward to this in so many ways. So thanks for saying that.
Yeah, I think it'll be good for you. And I can already tell from your voice, from the way you're looking and all that, you're much more relaxed because you don't have that. You've got different pressures going on. You've got stuff with Dawn. You've got stuff with family. But you don't have to, pressure so much. Just wanted to ask you, you're 2 years removed now. What's your thought about how the administration is dealing with federal employees and unions in particular? And what do you think needs to happen there?
Wow, that is such a sort of, I'll say, complicated question.
That's why you got paid the big bucks.
Right. One that I am actually very happy to answer. And this is kind of Tony Reardon, former NTEU national president, who's now retired, unplugged. And in order to answer that, let me tell you a quick story. So when I was in high school, I was a foreign exchange student in what at that time was West Germany. And I had to go to classes. And so I was in a kind of a history class, German history class, but it was focused on American history. And these kids were in the 17-year-old range, and I had gone over as probably somebody who was too young to really be in the program, but I'd interviewed and all that stuff, and I was selected. So I'm over there, and I'm like 14, and I'm in this class, and they decided to do this brilliant thing of let's put the American kid in a chair at the front of the room, and let's pelt him with questions. So I go up there, and the very first question was this young man, and he said to me, Tony, now this is all happening in English, right? He said, Tony, why is the U.S. civil service the marvel of the world? Well, I'm 14 years old. Now, I will tell you that, you have that moment where all of a sudden you feel the sweat start to bead up on your forehead because you've just been asked a question that, well, frankly, I don't know a good answer for this. And in that moment, I gave an answer because, I can certainly think on my feet, but it wasn't a well thought out answer. Now, fortunately, my father had been a federal employee. He was an air traffic controller. So it wasn't as though it was completely foreign thing to me, but I didn't give a good answer. And then, of course, over time, obviously now I can certainly deal with that. But I raised that story because it was evident even to German students and candidly to the entire world how outstanding our civil service, our federal employees were and are. And what we have now, in my view, is we have an administration that came in with Doge and whatever other craziness they brought forth, and they have really sought to destroy
Yep.
our civil service. They have destroyed lives. And, I can use words like unconscionable and all that stuff. But the reality is that our civil service, because of this damage, will no longer be the marvel of the world. And that is, I think, shocking. I think it is sad. I know people, as we all do, who have been emotionally hurt, monetarily hurt, or economically hurt by all this. But and certainly I care about those people. Those are the people that, as the national president of NTEU, I represented. And so I feel them deeply in my heart and in my soul. But we can't lose sight of it is also damaging our entire country. It's helping to damage our standing in the world. When you have FDA employees, for example, inspectors being moved out. One of the things I remember at a legislative conference we had at NTEU, and we had a representative from Illinois in Representative Quigley. And, I remember him telling us all in this big ballroom in a hotel, telling us all a story about, look, when the American people sit down at dinner, they don't sit there and say, pass me the pork chops and, oh man, I wonder if they're safe, right? That doesn't happen. We all sit down at dinner. We all eat the food that we eat, knowing that our federal government, our FDA in that instance, has done the work necessary to keep us safe. And we can't be sure of that, or we are less certain of that. It's like the story of the nuclear scientists that were fired by Doge, and then later on it was like, holy mackerel! Oh, I guess we shouldn't have fired them. We got to go back and hire them again. And look, I can tell, it's that story over and over and over, and the impact that it's having on the IRS, for example. Oh, by the way, the very people who bring in 95 or 96, depends on who you're talking to, % of the revenue of this nation And so I guess this is a long-winded, sort of passionate answer to your question, Duncan, that I believe that what this administration is doing to our civil service and thus to our nation is a problem. And I believe that all of these kinds of things, I mean, we know we're experiencing right now what's going on with the tariffs and all that, until the American people I'm going to say en masse, whatever that means, right? 3.5% or whatever it is, until people stand up and say, this ends now, it's going to continue.
Yep.
You're
absolutely right.
If I could jump in here for a minute, what I've always said, my father was a civil servant. He worked for the Department of Defense almost his entire adult life while he was working. But it takes years to build up a civil service that's the envy of the world, and you can tear it all apart overnight, and that's what we're seeing. But I think I'd like to hear your reaction to this, because I just found out that the tax filing season is going to start on President's Day next year. Last time that happened was during COVID, because the IRS doesn't have enough staff to get it going. I think if you want to be an investigative reporter next year, all you have to do is park yourself outside an IRS Taxpayer Assistance Center and see how many people line up and how many people walk out not able to get anything done. Tony, I don't think the public has yet seen the impact of all these cuts. What's your view on this?
Oh, I 100% agree. And in fact, I was watching a news program today, and that's kind of my reaction to so much of what's happening. Certainly with regard to, like you mentioned, the IRS, there's always a delayed reaction when a government administration takes action, right? I mean, that's just the way it works. And I think we are certainly experiencing that situation now. I mean, people aren't going to be able to. Well, first of all, you're going to have a lot of our most vulnerable people who aren't going to be able to even file, in a way that it doesn't cost them money, through the IRS. I mean, that's being canceled as I understand it. And I'm not like in the day to day, and, I get the information the same way you guys do now, just kind of listening on the news and reading the newspapers and all that. But, so many of our most vulnerable aren't going to be able, taxpayer assistance centers are being closed, so where are people going to go? Because folks need answers to questions. Their phones aren't going to be answered. I mean, right before I think I left NTEU, I think phones were being answered, and don't quote me on this, but it was, certainly above 70%, I believe. And then at some point, I think, didn't they get up to 75% or 76%? And now remember, that was from 13%.
Yep.
And so the money that the IRS got from Congress enabled that improvement, and that helps people file. And when people file, it puts money into the coffers of the United States of America. So I think we're going to be experiencing some economic problems just in that regard. I mean, the whole thing is, for me, just, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. Entire careers and families are being destroyed, frankly, for people who have done nothing but take an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America, who have worked for presidents who were Republican, who were presidents that were Democrats. It didn't matter. They came to work to do the work of the American people, and this is how they're treated. And I'll tell you, I mean, we could talk about immigration, we could talk about all the various things that are going on in this country right now. The bottom line is that the American people and the standing of the United States of America, both internally and internationally, is being destroyed, and that is going to hurt us all.
Yeah, I agree. Duncan, we're running out of time here. Anything last subject you'd like to bring up with Tony?
Understand you're getting ready to go to the, if you're not there already, at the NTEU National Convention. What are you looking forward to while you're there?
So that's a great question. I'm not there yet. I will be traveling on Sunday. Um, I think, and I've thought a lot about this. I think the most important, or the thing I am looking forward to the most, is seeing the people. Because, the bottom line, and you've heard me say this, Duncan and Larry, you've probably heard me say it as well. In the final analysis, when you work for or work with a union, it is a it is all about building relationships. It's all about all of us coming together and trying to build an organization to which people want to belong. And so that's what I'm looking forward to seeing. I'm looking forward to seeing Doreen, the current national president, and what she's done there because I think she's done a fantastic job of fighting against what's happening with this current administration. One thing I will say about there's going to be Bob Tobias, who's a former national president of NTEU, Tony Reardon, and now the current national president. There's going to be two former and one current national president. And if you look at each of them, I think what you find is people who have dealt with different things, but stepped up to lead people who are committed to others. It isn't about individuals, it's about the greater good. And that's what a union is, of course, right? And so that's what I'm really looking forward to seeing all that.
Tony, you mentioned the former presidents being at the convention. The one that will not be there, unfortunately, is Colleen Kelly. We lost Colleen Kelly recently, and I've known her all the way back to the time she was a staff member at the National Union before she was elected as executive vice president and later became the national president of the union. So maybe a couple of thoughts about Colleen.
So I thank you for mentioning Colleen. Well, let me say this. I knew Colleen long before I ever worked at NTEU. I knew her as kind of a friend because many people know my dad worked at NTEU. And in fact, my dad was her first boss at the national office. So she would come over for dinner when I'd be home from college or, whatever, and I would be able to spend some time with her. And she kind of became a bit of a friend at that time. And then I worked for and with Colleen for 25 years. I got the call on a Saturday night from her brother because I was fairly close to her family as well. And I had talked to Colleen. We had set up time to talk. Like I want to say it was like the next Wednesday. I got the call on Saturday night. I was eating dinner with my family from her brother Kevin, who told me that Colleen had died, and it was a shock. It was sad. What I will tell you is that Colleen was, and I said this, I think, at her retirement when I was taking over as national president. I was around Colleen so long, for so long, I got to see her in action. And there were times when she had to make a decision about, okay, do I focus on NTEU or do I focus on my family? Because things would happen, right? Important things. And here's what I'll tell you. I never, ever saw one solitary situation where Colleen put anything ahead of the union that she led. I could talk about Colleen for hours, but I think if there's one sort of tidbit to pass along about her is that she was so committed in her heart and soul to NTEU. That is one of the things that always kind of sat with me and really kind of something that I truly admired in her.
Tony Reardon is the retired national president of the National Treasury Employees Union and a very happy retiree from everything we can glean, and a soon to be grandparent who I'm sure will be very happy about that as well. thank you for joining us, Tony. We really, Duncan and I both, I think I can speak for both of us, really enjoyed the conversation with you today. And it's time for us to wrap this up. So this is Lannan and Giles, Unscripted. We have one ask for you as the audience. Like and subscribe to this podcast. We appreciate it. Duncan and Larry will be back soon with another episode. In the meantime, this is Unscripted.